You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
Hi there. In today's episode, Mandy McGill is joining us to share her entrepreneurial journey in commercial real estate.
Mandy is the founder of Inspired Consulting and Aedifico. After many years in the industry as a recruiter, Mandy is now building the digital ecosystem for CRE AEC talent.
Mandy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mandy, we're going to just dive right in. So you've spent most of your career now in recruitment in commercial real estate. Can you give us a little insight, and we'll dive in deeper later, of like what's the current state and the process of recruitment? Like what's going on right now in the AEC industry?
Yeah, I think what's happening is not unique to AEC. I think it's happening to everyone, right? Like recruitment is just really, really challenging right now. And I think that I pinpointed the reason. It has a lot to do with monopoly, right? And we have this big monopoly with LinkedIn, and it's kind of the only place that people can go to find talent. And at the same time, it's also trying to be a social media site. It's trying to be all of these different things, right? And so recruiters are kind of left not knowing what to do. And then on the other end, you have like local recruiters, which is what I've been doing for so long. And the reality is we're expensive. I mean, at 20% every time there's a placement, you're looking at, a $20,000, $40,000 placement fee every single time you use one of those, right? So it's just what's in the middle. There doesn't seem to be any other options than those. So I think that's kind of where we're at, as an industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that you've spent a lot of time in construction and recruiting, and so I know there are some unique challenges there. Like, what have you seen where you've just thought, why can't we do this differently? Or I know you want to help as many people as possible. So what have you identified as gaps there?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I started meeting regularly with candidates who were asking me to help them figure out how to leave the industry. Oh. And, I saw this one after another. And so, then as we were talking about like, what could you do differently? Like, in what ways could you think outside the box within your career? And that was a struggle. And a lot of times we would end up talking about how could you do this, but do it on your own? Your skill set is something that so many people need out there, and you're sort of caught within this box of, working for a company, which is how everybody does it. What if you did it more like I do? And so, over and over, and the problems that they were facing were often, management that was unwilling to see that they have the ability to grow in the ladder. A lot of times people were seeing others, their peers being promoted and them not being promoted. And oftentimes this was an equity issue. And so I really started thinking about, how could I do business development for them? Like, in what ways could I help them kind of get out of this box that they're in? And what I was seeing for myself as a recruiter is I was starting to realize that like my integrity would not allow me to move them from one shitty company to another one, right? Like it was like, okay, like it's going to be the same culture. The entire industry is affected by the same challenges. And so that produces often the same culture unless you're very intentional about it. And here's a 5-10% raise and go do the same thing with a different group of people. And after you've been doing it for 13 years, you're placing the same people in different roles in different companies, and you're discovering, nope, it's exactly the same there too. Right. So I think that's one of the big challenges that we face. And then kind of another one is just, we have an aging workforce. The skill sets, people who know how to build are really, they're in their 50s often or older. I mean, a lot of these superintendents are working well into their 70s, and they're not really taking the knowledge and passing it down. So we have that issue as well that's really kind of specific to our industry, and it's a challenge that we need to face.
Yeah, so this conversation, we were so excited to have you on from your viewpoint of becoming an entrepreneur, but really there's a lot even deeper going on with what you've created, because you're now allowing more people to become entrepreneurs, which I want to dig a little bit into. And also you're really changing how things have been done in the industry. Like I think we can all picture it. You see these companies from the outside and they're very respectful, but sometimes working in these conditions doesn't fit every worker, and things are changing, but maybe company cultures aren't keeping up with it. And I think we can all see where maybe construction hasn't kept up, but then there are these outside forces. Like you said, like there's not a lot of people going into trades. There's a lot of people aging out with really great experiences, but how are they growing? How are they finding the right fit? So, I mean, if you could go like very basic, but maybe just explain to people, and most of our audience gets construction industry, but how there really isn't this opportunity to become an entrepreneur, or there isn't an opportunity necessarily to grow your network. And so I know you've seen that not only as an issue working individually with people, but a gap where you're looking to fill, right? Mm-hmm. Is that along the right lines?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So say you're a brand new construction manager, right? And you're coming in and you need to learn, like you need to grow. And so the first place you're going to go is one of these big construction companies, right? And you're going to sit there for, 4 or 5 years, you're a project engineer, and then you become a project manager. And so now you kind of have this skill set. Some people, very few of them, but some people will jump out on their own. Mostly men will kind of jump out and do that. But most of them just continue on that track, and they kind of depend on the business development team from that company to win the work. And they really are not at all exposed to what happens on the business development side, right? Like they're kind of in the weeds, in the project. And so thinking about it from that big picture of how would I like bust out of this and do business development, it's just not a part of their everyday life, because all of the departments are so siloed within these companies, right? And so they don't see that opportunity because the business development isn't done for them. So, I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but yeah, I'd be curious to hear from you all what you think.
Yeah, Mandy, I've worked as an architect and worked in construction, and I've seen exactly what you're describing. And I think to add to your point, I think the job, most of the job is just being heads down and focusing on what it is your tasks, your daily tasks are. Maybe you're planning the project or managing it on a day-to-day basis. But so much of it is exactly what you said, siloed, that no one's ever taught how to do any business development. They're not taught how to be leaders necessarily in an organization or to look for and win work. And those that end up doing that to kind of have to take a pretty big step out on their own to be able to, it's a pretty brave soul that decides to go to a real estate meeting and meet real estate people who speak a totally different language, right? Coming from a construction side. I've been on all three sides of the table, I guess you could say, but Similarly with architects, you're expected to be in the office for 12, 14 hours a day working, and it's exhausting because your schedule is just a grind over and over and over. But you have to do that to learn. But I think once you've learned enough to have some amount of value that's portable, you really should start meeting people in a business development capacity. I think that's super valuable. And Rachel and I were discussing kind of our conversation, this idea about the portability of, kind of being able to be an entrepreneur in construction or even AAC. Like, to me, that's just very passionate about that, because I think there's so many opportunities that aren't even like presented to people. People aren't even aware that they could do certain things, so I think it's a pretty exciting topic.
Yeah, John, absolutely. I think that's a great point, because also to layer on that, John and I have talked in other episodes about, it's a tough time in the industry, and a lot of these older, very skilled workers are, especially in the AEC part of the industry, in all parts really, honestly, in the commercial real estate industry, but there are cycles, and when things are growing and being built, like, that's amazing, and if you're in a good company, but it's not, even when you're in a good company, when projects aren't and buildings aren't being built, or projects, like, you're now at the hands of your company, right? No matter how long you've been there. So I know you saw some gaps also, not just in the recruiting process, but also what we're talking about is the networking, and how do you meet other people? How do you share your skills? So can you explain how, if you actually just want to start from scratch, and what Aedifico is, and some of those other parts of what you're building to address those issues?
Yeah. So there's what Aedifico is and what it will eventually become, right? And so we can kind of dive into that. So we're currently putting together the MVP, which will release in January, and this will be, it will have the ability to match scopes of work with individuals who can do the work, right? So it's very specific to our industry. There are several drop-down boxes that you can kind of pick from that will give you the ability to kind of tailor exactly what it is that you need. And then on the freelancer side, they can go in and basically say all the types of projects that they have experience with. The level of experience they have, what certifications they have, all of that they'll be able to kind of pick that, and then the algorithm will automatically put people together. And I do want to point out that I did say scopes of work. We are allowing for people to go on and enter the job description, but we really hope to get away from that pretty quickly, because we're a project-based industry, right? I mean, I feel like in some ways we don't want to admit that that's what we are, but there's no reason why people can't work on a project. And if it's a pretty simple project, why they couldn't be working on 5 or 6 at a time, right? So, and the other reason that entering scopes of work is important is because we haven't even touched the surface on the public side and the RFP process, and how we hope to put a good dent in that as well. And so public entities can also come to Aedifico and enter their scopes of work and be directly matched with people who can do the work. So that's what it will be in January. And then eventually our hope is to give people the ability to share their entire portfolio of work, to share the things they're passionate about, to have a For You page that people can kind of, video the work that they're working on, and kind of become influencers in this space. So I think this is what we hope for it to become. And yeah, the team that's building it is amazing. And so that's kind of the gist of it at this point. How do you guys see yourselves using that, something like that?
Yeah, so just a question on that, because you had pointed out something that I think is important earlier in the conversation that kind of seems like it would tie into what you're building, the cultural piece, right? And finding ways to match people culturally. And I know that's kind of a soft thing, it's kind of a qualitative thing, and I don't know exactly how you do that. But I'm just kind of curious, is that something you're also looking at building into the system?
That's such a good point and question. I think that like really are maybe not so much like in the matching of the culture, but more influencing the way that the culture is in the first place, right?
Okay.
And so I would say that would be more of what we would hope to tackle is, you said it's soft, it's cushy. I think the thing is that I don't want to say the majority, but a lot of the individuals who will be using this are going to be like kind of that Gen Z millennial, and then also I think that we're going to see a lot of people who are pretty close to retirement who are experiencing inequity on that end where they're aging and they're not experiencing what they did 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, part of the reason I asked that question, I actually got a call from a construction company the other day, and I was being asked about an older gentleman who I'd worked with as a senior project manager on a project. They'd asked me my opinion of that particular individual and, whether they'd be a good fit and, their experience, et cetera. But a big part of the conversation was cultural. It was like, is he going to kind of fit in well? Is he work well with the clients? And so much of that is qualitative and so I think there's a way you're going to weave that into the product and the offering, but it's such an important piece because I've seen what you were talking about earlier with where there's this cultural mismatch in people. It can cause real problems on a project and for people's careers because people can do really, really well in one situation and not do well at all in another. And it all comes down to, are they a good fit for the culture and the team?
Yeah, and I think that that's really also going to depend on the client's ability to express what their culture is.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And not all of them can do that. So even helping
That's
them,
right.
helping them a little bit with that might help
yes,
too.
exactly. Yeah.
But that's also a really good point because, the way things have always been done is you start with a company, you're there, moving your way up. But what if you don't fit, but you just, keep your mouth shut and the other side keeps their mouth shut and you just kind of both go along and nothing gets better. But if you're sort of forced of, okay, I'm hiring for a project, we want to get the right people real quickly. So it does, like you said, it might force people to really look at their culture and what type of people fit. And then on the other side, though, it might even just be helpful of, all right, well, this person is working with us on one project. They just need to match our goal for the project. They don't have to fit in with the company for 20 years.
Right. And that's really like if we're able to truly move into a place where we are project based instead of employer based, then, and I see some sort of both of those happening simultaneously. But if we're project based, then we could get to the point where we're saying, what is the culture of this project? The culture of this project is we move as quickly as possible. We're kind to each other, whatever, right? You define those things from the beginning, and then you say what your values are as a project, and then every individual who's involved in that participates in that, and they know what they're signing up for. And then the next project is something different, right? It's going to depend on what you're building and who you're building it for, and all of those things,
100%.
right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've worked on projects where culture was completely different from another project. It all comes back to the leadership of whoever the owner is, the client, and then the leadership within to deliver on those goals, right?
That's right.
But I think but the thing I think is really exciting about your idea and your new business is it seems like one of the major aims is to empower the worker. It's not necessarily to give them the ability to market themselves and put themselves in a position where they have more ability to connect. Is that a good way to kind of quantify it or
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Give them the ability to market themselves and not have to depend on somebody else. I think everybody wants that. And you guys were talking about like the way that we have a flow, right? And, sometimes construction is really high. I mean, we've had so many cranes in the sky in Seattle. It's been nuts. And then sometimes, like right now, it's a struggle, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this gives people the ability to explore other areas of creativity that they want, they want to make money doing something a little bit different for a while, or, like you find other ways to make money. So you could work one project and then, kind of have that portfolio career. And Aedifico gives you the ability to do that.
Yeah, that's also a great point because, you've worked on projects and the goal is to get something done. And I've been lucky that I've worked at a smaller development company where I could try other tasks. Like I was property manager for a bit when someone went on maternity leave. Like if I wanted to learn the development pro forma side, I could. And so that was really valuable to be able to have and touch different parts. But when you're in a big company and you're working on deadlines, you don't always have that access. So to be able to say, all right, we're slow, I'm going to work more with architects, or I'm going to, try the project management side, or where it's not going to ruin your career, but it could build into something, or it could just be a one-off project where you learn some skills. So I think that's really good also growth opportunity for people to try things with it being valuable to the person you're working with, but you're not giving in to how many ever years.
Exactly.
Can I ask you a little bit about kind of your inspiration for kind of getting started with this? What specifically was it that you saw that kind of inspired you to get going? You've clearly had a lot of experience. Was there one thing that kind of, because have you been an entrepreneur before, or was this kind of your first experience with that, or?
Yeah. So I started Inspire 13 years ago without being like any experience being a recruiter. I knew nothing about construction. I saw all the cranes in the sky in Seattle, and I went to a CRE event, Commercial Real Estate Women, and met the director for Clark Construction. They're out there. He's back there actually again, but they were my very first client, and so I met with someone from Sellon, actually the gentleman who did all the pre-con on the Spears, and I said, hey, can you help me, like, I don't know what construction managers do. Like, help me understand this. So we had coffee, and he started referring me, right? And that's how I became a recruiter. And so I just I have a lot of ideas. I want to see them come to fruition. That's really hard to do inside of a company unless you're building it, right? So that's kind of how I started Inspire Consulting, and that kind of morphed into other things. So I've done business development consulting and just learning the whole industry, so the idea for Aedifico was really spurred on by those individuals that I met, the candidates who were asking to get out of the industry. Because at the same time, I was working with someone on Upwork. I asked her if she could help me with my marketing. And as we started to build the new Inspire website, I was like, oh, this could be a thing, and so it dawned on me that, like, why can't we have Upwork? Why don't we have Upwork? But Upwork is not for us, right? Like, if you're building a building, you can't go to Upwork ever, right? Like we need skilled people building our buildings. Yeah. So so that's kind of how the idea came to fruition.
No, that's fantastic. And are you partners with someone, or is this kind of purely your thing at this point?
Yeah, I have 3 wonderful partners. So one of them is Isabel, who I met from Upwork. So she does all of our marketing work. And then I have Carrie, who is, she like 20 years of business development in the industry, mostly on the mechanical side, but great relationship maker. And so she's helping me as well. And then I recruited Priyanka, who is our engineering manager, and she's the one who's taken the bull by the horns and making this whole thing happen. So she's amazing. Priyanka is in the UK and from India, and Isabel is in Italy and from Colombia. So we have an international team. It's a lot of fun.
Wow, fantastic. Very cool.
That's amazing. I love that this not started, but you used Upwork and you saw the, what this freelance gig in, how it works in other industries or for building your own business. And why not for construction? And it is a new way, absolutely, of thinking. But I do love your tagline of blend of Upwork and LinkedIn, because I think those are two very distinct, and people understand that. And in terms of the LinkedIn part, which I'd love for you to share what your goal of what that could become. But John and I just had this conversation. We were talking about our own marketing this morning, and we were talking about where do we find our audience and how do we reach them? And it had to be a blend of LinkedIn, which, we're starting to see less project pictures, less, it's become a lot more personal. And then there's the Twitter piece, which isn't as in depth, isn't, long form. And so we could see definitely a place where we would go on to a place where there are a lot of consultants and developers, and even if you had investors, and John and I are talking all the time with entrepreneurs in the goal that they can start working together. And we just had this conversation of bringing people together on projects. And so if we could send them all to your spot, and if people could come together and say, I'm doing this project, and it's a short-term project, maybe it's a smaller project, but I need these roles, and people can start building and working on their teams together, because without that, it's literally, who do you know, who does John know, who he's worked with, who do I know, how do we connect each other? And
right.
I love doing that, but for there to be a place for our industry to do that is amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's also so important that we can do it. I mean, look, I'm in Seattle, you guys are on the East Coast. So, that we can cross bring everybody together, right? Instead of it being so separate. That's one of the things that I think people think, well, how are you going to do, construction? Because it's so local. It's well, of course, the actual builders, but managing a project you can do from literally anywhere. I'm so excited to kind of be that place. And yes, one of our goals eventually is to work in the ability to have B2B kind of marketing on the platform, that we can, that it's everybody's kind of, that's the place where everybody gathers. And, it's the AEC version of Twitter or,
So I'm super curious about your kind of launch strategy, and I'm sure you're still developing it because the MVP is due out in January. But what are you thinking? Because, like I said, I've worked in architecture and construction, and exactly what you just said is hey, I know Joe from down the street or Sarah from across the other neighborhood. It's very local. Are you planning on launching this with a focus on Seattle or some very specific area, or are you going to go wide and then try to generate interest via social media, or kind of how do you do that? I'm just very curious.
Yeah, it's both of those. So I kind of see it as I'm doing business development, and then we're doing, traditional social media marketing, right? So my role and Carrie's role is really to bring in the clients. And so, but we're not starting necessarily in Seattle. It's more of a strategy of who are going to be the most attractive clients. So we are pursuing owners. And it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, owners are everywhere, right? So I'm talking with Amazon, for example, and have some approvals there. Well, Amazon owns buildings all over the world. So that's, that's kind of the strategy, is pursuing owners on both the public and the private side. And so I've served on the couple different task forces in my city, and so in that way I'm sort of starting local, and then very quickly can take what we're learning and kind of blast it out there. But I also I'll be speaking at a Built Worlds event in March in Austin. And then I do intend to spend some time in New York this year as well. So working with the Cornet group, and then possibly Rachel with NAOP, or however it kind of works out, that's the plan, is kind of not really regionally, but more like who are going to be the ones that are going to bring the most talent. And we haven't started yet, and we already have 300 freelancers who are interested in being on the platform when it launches.
So are some of the freelancers owners, project managers, in addition to internal? Like, I think of construction managers as either internal construction managers for a company or owners, project managers for owners. So what's the mix look like?
So
maybe?
yeah, it's 100% both. It's every single one, right? Like, there's no one who within the industry who wouldn't benefit from having their jobs posted here. But I think what you're asking is, you have owners like big tech companies who own lots of real estate. And then you have the owners' representatives such as JLL and CBRE and Cushwake. And then you have the GCs, right? So like, when I envision this,
to add to that, sometimes the owner will hire a construction manager to oversee the GC, right? If you're a developer, I've seen that done.
Almost always, right? And so that individual, I want them to be able to find that individual who's very skilled in, say, building a data center, who can manage the GC. Like, obviously, we're not, GCs are not going anywhere, right? Like, all of the insurance and all of the things that they need in order to build a project, like, that's not going anywhere. But anyone who can manage the surrounding pieces of it could be found on Aedifico, and that could benefit any one of those.
Fantastic.
As a founder now, like, moving into prop tech, like, you've had a very successful recruitment entrepreneurship journey. What are you finding, like, now that you're seeing how the industry responds to tech, how it is, sharing your ideas, fundraising? Like, you'd be great, for anyone to learn from your entrepreneurship journey, but now you have this whole new movement into tech. Like, is there things that you've learned along the way, or has it changed your mind about how you see the industry adapting technology? Like, any thoughts of with this new move?
Yeah, I really want to get your take on this too, because you guys kind of play in that prop tech space also. I think that, like, technology is embraced by the industry when it works. And often what you see is technologists who are saying they're building a product, and then they're going, oh, who can use this? And then they sort of splatter it about, and they're like, ooh, we think this could be useful in AEC or CRE, but they don't know anything about us and what we do, right? And so I think that the big thing is, like, we need to be investing in people who get the industry before they try to start something. That's kind of my take. And like, it's always this, oh, it's such an old school industry. No, we're all human. We're all, like, embracing the same things that everybody else is. It's just that if it doesn't work, we're not going to use it. So yeah, what do you guys think?
I think that you're like hit the nail on the head, that a lot of people come to change the industry with, we've solved your problem. And so what you are already doing is amazing. Like, I see this gap, I see this opportunity, and I think you're right. Like, do we need a lot more innovation? Yes. But is everyone against it? No. But it is, like, we need to find the champions, and we need people who want to align. And already, you're working very diligently, right? Like, you've done a ton of research. You've had a lot of conversations. You're not saying, well, my investment team says I have to launch by this date, and it needs to be, selling this much already. And so I agree with the way you're thinking. And I think, like, we need more people like you, but also people who understand, like, maybe the people writing the big checks also don't understand me. So I'm going to go find the people in the industry, which I know is something you've done, people who want change and are champions for change, but may not be the, big VCs or the, the tech names, but people who have this and understand and want to see this change, but also you're a founder who is open to people giving you ideas and have you thought of this? And so I think there is a lot of need for that. Everyone wants the industry to grow, and we just want it with people we trust and, growth that aligns. I don't know. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this a bunch, right? I spent some time in financial technology before getting into real estate, and just the beginnings of prop tech in 2008, 2010, when people were just starting to talk about it. I remember seeing, and it's continued, it's gotten a lot better, but it was a lot of tech bros trying to disrupt the industry, and they didn't really know the industry though, and you can't really disrupt something you don't understand. And seeing people like Mandy, who really understands deeply the industry and some of the problems where they're making those connections, to me that's super exciting, and that's the way a lot of problems are going to be solved. That doesn't mean that young people can't innovate and create great ideas and really help in terms of prop tech, but I think ultimately somebody on the leadership team has to really understand the industry, otherwise things will just fall flat. And that's happened, but it's evolving, and I think it's an exciting time. I think there's a lot of, I definitely agree. Like, people have always talked about real estate and construction being kind of this backward, kind of industries, but in reality, any industry wants to innovate and is desperately seeking ways to be more efficient and find ways to make more profit, so they can continue what they do and do it well. So I think it's an exciting time. I think we're really maturing, I guess you could say, from some respect in terms of our use of technology. And everything from robots, artificial intelligence right now is just transforming everything. And I think it's just an exciting time to be in construction and AEC. So I don't know. I'm excited. I think it's a great time to be in the industry and doing what we're doing. And I think, Mandy, what you're doing is fantastic. I think just to kind of to put a bow on it a little bit, I'd love to hear more kind of in terms of wrapping up. I'd love to hear more, Mandy, about you and kind of where you see things going in 2025, where you think the most opportunity is for what you're doing. I know you mentioned the launch, but are there other kind of things, goals and milestones you're looking at?
Yeah, I think I was thinking kind of just bigger picture, what I'm excited about for next year. And I think one of the things is, I think that we are far enough out from COVID and all of the very fast change that we all went through to start. I believe that next year we're going to start really being intentional about what the new kind of way of work is. I think for so long we've been like, oh, what does the data show? Like, what's happening? Are people returning to work? Are they not? And of course the news is still making this a battle, but I think that as an industry, we're starting to embrace that, probably most places are going to be hybrid, right? They're going to have some version of in office and at home, and if they're not, they should, because the talent wants that. And so I think that we're going to start getting used to that and easing into it and being okay, this is the way we work and this is how we can do it well, right? And be intentional about it. So I think that is kind of what I'm most excited about. I'd like to say that we're going to experience some stability because of it, but I don't think that's true. I actually think you got to get on the roller coaster and ride it, because it is, AI is changing things very quickly. And in some ways that's a good thing. So get on the innovation train, because it's coming. So as far as for Aedifico, our hope is to be working with some really impressive clients, to be giving people the freedom to leave their job that they don't love and go out on their own. and not be so scared to make that jump. So really, that's our hope for next year. And then, of course, we're going to learn so much. So, I hope to talk to you again after we have some of that, gathered some of that data.
Yes, that would be great. And just for the last question is, how can people connect with you, and how do they get on board and be part of Aedifico, or learn more about what you're doing with Aedifico?
Yeah, we're on every platform. My favorite is TikTok, and you can find us at Aedifico, and it's Aedifico.ai.
Thank you so much, Mandy, for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, nice talking with y'all.
We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode, and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.